Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Michelle Fondin and I'm the author of Help, I Think My Loved One is an Alcoholic, a survival guide for lovers, family, and friends. This book is available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible books, and the links are all below. Also, if you're new to my channel, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, so hit the subscribe button. I post a video on alcoholism. If you have someone you love who is an alcoholic or an addict, pretty interchangeable at this point, but if you have a loved one who's an alcoholic, I post one video per week on dealing with an alcoholic loved one. Today, we're talking about 13 signs of the high-functioning alcoholic. As for me, here's my background. I was in a relationship with an alcoholic for 6 years, a romantic relationship with an alcoholic, a high-functioning alcoholic at that. Now, one thing you need to remember, alcoholism is a progressive and chronic disease. It always gets worse over time. So a high-functioning alcoholic can be high-functioning for 10, 20, 30 years, but rest assured it's going to take a nosedive at some point. Now, I wrote my book. I did about 200 hours of research in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and Narcotics Anonymous meetings. I interviewed 10 alcoholics in recovery who had been in recovery in an AA program for at least 2 years. Some of them it was 10, 15 years. And I also worked in a rehab center as a volunteer teaching yoga for 1 year. I do have vast knowledge in the realm of alcohol addiction. Here's the thing about high-functioning alcoholics, if you can call them that. It's a really weird term to me. But a high-functioning alcoholic is someone who holds down a job, might have a family, is responsible more or less to their loved ones. So they're bringing in a paycheck, they're keeping a steady job, they're responsible more or less to their loved ones, and they seem to be functioning pretty well on a day-to-day basis, okay? So that's really how you can tell if somebody is high functioning as an alcoholic, okay? So we're gonna go through these 13 signs so you can really get a feel for, is my alcoholic loved one just a heavy drinker? Or is my alcoholic loved one, in fact, an alcoholic or addict? Because oftentimes what we don't realize, what's happening behind the scenes, is that alcohol and drugs do go hand in hand, especially as the disease of alcoholism progresses. And that is because the alcohol starts to have a lesser and lesser effect on the alcoholic, meaning they need to consume a whole lot more alcohol in order to get the same effect as they once got. So then a lot of times what they will do is they will couple it with drugs, albeit prescription drugs or street drugs, in order to enhance the effects of the alcohol. Number one, they use alcohol as a coping mechanism and they celebrate with alcohol for every occasion. Okay, so let me explain to you how this works. And you might understand, because if you know someone who has this behavior, you can recognize that behavior. It's really funny because my alcoholic used to say, yeah, maybe I might drink a little bit much, or maybe I might drink during the week, but you know, I can stop at any time. It's absolutely no problem. And I'll stop at like Thanksgiving, or I'll stop at Christmas, or I'll stop after New Year's, or after the Super Bowl, or after Valentine's Day, or after, it was always like a date. There was always a date. But in addition to that, the alcoholic will find any occasion to drink. So if they're celebrating, they drink. If they're sad, they drink. If they're stressed, they drink. If they're relaxing, they drink. They will always find an availability, their time schedule, in order to find that occasion to drink. And they will drink for every single emotion. So every emotion that comes to them is an excuse to have a drink. So you will often hear them justify their drinking through occasions, such as I mentioned, like Christmas, Super Bowl, St. Patty's Day, whatever, or through their emotions. So I've had a rough day, or I'm celebrating, I got a promotion, or it's my birthday, you know? So they will always justify it through emotions or occasions. So that is number one. Number two, now this might seem actually counterintuitive. They impose limits on their drinking. Now let's reverse this psychology for a little bit. If you are not an alcoholic or a heavy drinker, when you go to an occasion, let's say happy hour, a birthday party, an anniversary party, a wedding, you're usually not having that conversation with yourself or other people and saying like, oh, I'll only drink wine or only drink beer or only have one cocktail and then maybe one cocktail like after dinner. If you do not have a drinking problem, you're not making plans about your drinking because you're not even thinking about it. Like for me, I was never someone who drank heavily except for college maybe, but after that, I could go 6 months to a year without a drink. It didn't matter to me. It was never really a part of my life. So if I went to a wedding or a celebration and I had one drink, I never even thought about it. And half the time I wouldn't even finish the drink. So it never even entered my mind. But an alcoholic will verbally say, as we go to this wedding, I'm only going to have 2 drinks, or I'm only going to drink wine now. I've left the beer, I've left the hard liquor, I'm just going to drink wine. In their head, switching from one to another seems less harmful for some odd reason. It's still alcohol, but in their head, if they want to switch drinks or if they want to put limits on it or impose limits on it, which they can never do, they can never hold on to those limits, it means that they have a problem. In conjunction with imposing limits on their drinking, they might say to you, well, I can only have 2 drinks because I'm going to drive the car tonight. But what ends up happening is the more they put limits on their drinking, the drunker they actually get. So they didn't go to that party, they didn't go to that event intending to get drunk. They intended to put limits on it, and actually they wound up drunk. So that is an annex to that sign number 2. Sign number 3. They will slowly or quickly change their circle of friends and start to compartmentalize their life. With my experience with my alcoholic, he really kept his hardcore drinking and drugging friends away from me. Meaning, he would go off and do his own thing, and he knew how bad it was. Like, he absolutely positively knew how bad it was. And so those drinking buddies, I was never, ever formally introduced to or informally introduced to. Not ever. Until the very end when things got very, very bad, I was never introduced to them because what they do is they justify their behavior by saying, oh, I'm just spending some guy time, or I'm just gonna go, this is where I go to hang out and decompress. So if they have like a favorite bar or a favorite pub that they hang out at, it's so they can decompress, and those are the friends that they decompress with. So they justify it by having friends that always need a drink just like them. One step further is because they're the high functioning alcoholics, so because they're holding down a job and paying their bills, and showing up to, let's say, half of the family events, but they're trying to show responsibility, they find friends that are actually worse off than them. So they will find friends who are way further ahead in the alcoholism than they are, or in drug addiction than they are, because they say, this is my friend Johnny. I'm helping Johnny. I'm helping Johnny with his issues with his wife, or I'm helping Maria because she really doesn't have anybody else to talk to but me. So they justify it by being like the psychotherapist, the counselor, the helper. They're doing this out of goodwill, the kindness of their heart. But in reality, what they're doing is to justify their own drinking and their own behavior. They are finding friends that are actually worse off than them in order to justify that their behavior is actually okay. That is why they compartmentalize as well, because they don't want you meeting their friends that are worse off. Because if you meet their friends that are worse off, you're gonna go, what the heck? Why are you hanging out with these people? Like, it makes absolutely no sense. You're college educated, you've got a job, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor. Like, your family doesn't understand it if you're an alcoholic and you're like hanging out with these friends that are like way worse down the line as far as their alcohol and drug addictions. They separate. They completely separate, and they live kind of like this double life. And that leads me to number 4. They engage in risky behavior. So risky behavior is because they're not cognizant of actually how much they drink, and they will lie to you about it too. One drink, and I write about this in my book, Help, I Think My Loved One is an Alcoholic. One drink to them is not the equivalent of one drink to you. One drink to them might be a glass this big filled with 10 shots of liquor. One drink to you might be a 4-ounce glass of wine. The amount of alcohol in a 4-ounce glass of wine is not the equivalent to a glass with 10 shots in it. You understand? That's how they justify it as well. So, but in their head, because they're trying to justify the patterns, because they're trying to hide it, they tell you or others, I just had one drink. Well, their one drink had 10 shots in it. So they say, I just had one drink, I'm good to drive. I'm really good to drive. And then they get behind the wheel of a car after they've had 10 shots of alcohol. It's that type of risky behavior. It's hanging out with these friends that are truly dangerous sometimes. We're talking about people who are worse off in their addictions, who may be drug dealers, who may have other risky behavior, such as, theft and things like that, or extreme gambling problems. But another thing, and this was not the problem with my alcoholic in my life, but a lot of alcoholics, especially high-functioning alcoholics, they will engage in risky sexual behavior. They might hire prostitutes or call girls or just hook up with someone from the bar that they normally attend. But none of this behavior would actually come to play if alcohol was not involved. Number 5, they isolate themselves. So this is not out during social hour. So just know that alcoholics are some of the most gregarious and social people that exist. In the last video, so if you haven't checked out the video that I published right before this one this month, what I mentioned was that alcoholics have a great personality for the most part. And the reason why they're so outgoing and gregarious is because they need to connect with as many people as they can in order to get their alcohol. So they understand that some people are going to turn their backs on them. Some people are going to decide not to be with them. And they need a bunch of people enabling in order for them to carry on this addiction. Now, this is part of an illness, you guys. This is part of a mental, physical, chemical, emotional illness. You realize this. This is not the behavior of a sane person. So they need to line up as many people as possible to enable them to continue to have their habit. On the outside, it seems like they have tons of friends. But on the inside, when they go home, a lot of times they will want to isolate themselves into their den, into their bedroom, into their basement, and just drink alone because they can't handle the criticism of other people. That's the first thing, especially family members and friends. And then the second reason is because they're so ashamed about how much they actually drink that they want to do it by themselves in isolation because they feel like if somebody notices actually how much they drink, then A, they're going to criticize, but B, they're just ashamed of it. They don't understand why they drink that much, and so they're very ashamed. That's why they like to isolate themselves. Number 6, split personality. This is what I like to call the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality, and I actually do write about it in my book, Help, I Think My Loved One is an Alcoholic. And this is the fact that sometimes they're a really nice person and sometimes they're a really mean person, but the behavior can change like that. Like you could be talking to them, and then 5 minutes later, they walk out of the kitchen and they walk back in and they're a totally different person. It's really nuts. It's so crazy. Now, a couple of things might have happened in those 5 minutes. The one could be that they took a drink, that they left the room, they downed a few shots, they came back, and that's why their personality changed. Or they took a pill or they snorted cocaine or whatever, and that's why their personality changed. The second reason is because the chemical dependency of alcohol for an alcoholic is so strong that when they don't have alcohol in their bodies, they go through such strong withdrawal symptoms, especially the first few days, that they become extremely irritable and they have that personality change. It's really, truly that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality. Crazy. Irritable without alcohol and a lot of anger. So as I mentioned in the previous number, that when they do not have alcohol in their bodies, if they are chemically dependent, they are alcoholics. There are physical withdrawal symptoms and psychological withdrawal symptoms that alcoholics do go through. Your body literally, it's like the synapses in the brain go completely crazy. There are a lot of other things happening in the body with neurotransmitters and serotonin levels going low, and actually because alcohol, and I wrote about this in the book, because alcohol actually raises the levels of serotonin really fast and then drops them. What happens for a lot of alcoholics is that their serotonin receptors in the brain shut down because the alcohol does it for the brain. The brain doesn't need to do it on its own. So serotonin is your feeling of happiness and good and everything's wonderful and peachy and I'm not depressed, right? What happens is an alcoholic who drinks regularly, the serotonin levels in their brain, like it's just shut off. The brain stops producing like things like dopamine, serotonin. And so what happens is they stop drinking. Guess what? No dopamine, no serotonin at all until the brain kickstarts itself back into producing those essential neurotransmitters. What happens is like irritability and anger and irritation and like they fly off the handle really easily. A lot of anxiety, a lot of like irrational behavior starts to happen and you're not understanding why. You're thinking like, oh my God, did you take a drink? And a lot of times it's not because they took a drink. It's because they didn't take a drink. That's why. And it's almost like when you're watching somebody who's an alcoholic get sober, at some point you're like, oh my God, take a drink. Because you understand that like with the first drink, they usually calm down. It's by the third drink that they get crazy again. Denial. I know you've dealt with this. You, a well-intending loved one, goes up to an alcoholic or a potential alcoholic and says to them, you know, I think your drinking's a little off. Like, it's a Tuesday night. You came over at 5 o'clock. You asked me if I wanted a glass of wine. I said no. You opened the wine and proceeded to drink the entire bottle in about 10 minutes. What gives here? So you start to have these conversations with your alcoholic loved one, and they don't want to hear it. They deny it. They give you reasons. They always have an excuse. They have probably 2,000 or 3,000 documented excuses in their excuse book. And it's, again, we're not placing blame here, and I want to make sure that you understand this. We're trying to understand. We're trying to understand what this is. So we're not making fun. We're not placing blame. We're trying to be compassionate and loving always, and really that's what I write about in my book. You've got to extend compassion and love to people who are suffering from a mental illness. I mean, you have to. What else are you going to do? It's not their fault. And for those of you that want to post it, it's their fault. Don't post it. I'll delete your post, honestly. It's not their fault. I've worked with so many alcoholics, and I will tell you that none of them would have chosen this. None of them. No more than you would have chosen cancer. If you've ever gotten breast cancer or colon cancer or whatever, like, same thing. I'm sure you would have never chosen that cancer, or diabetes, or obesity, or a stroke, or a heart disease, right? You would have never chosen any of that if you had the choice. Same thing for an alcoholic or addict. They didn't choose this. The denial is really a part of the disease. It's a part of the brain disease because it is a brain disease. It's part of the brain disease that the brain is kind of like shuts down when someone comes in the way of the alcohol and that person. So they will do everything they possibly can to deny it. So that's one reason. The other reason for the denial is that they're embarrassed. They're really embarrassed. Like, okay, have you ever, like, in a moment of your life where you're depressed and sad, like, I don't know, you broke up with a boyfriend or something, or a girlfriend, or somebody in your family died. So you've had these moments, right? So you've had these moments where you're like, oh, I just want to buy an entire cake and a tub of ice cream, and I'm just going to, like, drown my sorrows in it. So I'm going to, like, eat this tub of ice cream and like just, with a fork in the middle of the cake and just eat the whole thing. I don't really care. I'm so sad. And someone walks into the room and they're like, what are you doing? Like, seriously, what are you doing? Are you eating the entire cake with a fork? Are you scooping ladles full of ice cream out of this tub? What are you doing? What's the first response? Oh, I'm just eating an entire cake and a full tub of ice cream. Is that what you're going to say? No. Your first response is probably going to be like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I don't know. You know, like going to make up some sort of excuse, right? Because you're embarrassed. You're embarrassed. You're ashamed. You finally come to your senses and don't realize why you're doing it. It's the same thing for an alcoholic. You realize this, but this is their everyday life. This is not a one-time thing for them. This is their everyday life. They're living with this shame. They're living with this guilt. They're living with these remorseful feelings on the inside. Of course they're going to deny it. They do not have hangovers. High-functioning alcoholics, it's really where the body becomes super duper accustomed to alcohol. And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, they wake up in the morning and they go to work and they're fine. And you're like, where are the consequences? Like, seriously, where are the consequences? But for a lot of high-functioning alcoholics, they actually do not have hangovers. They don't even have the headache. They might have a little bit of dry mouth, but they can either start drinking in the morning or have a sip of water during the day and they're fine. That's the difference too, is that they actually don't have a hangover. They have an awful memory. Their memories are terrible when it comes to the periods during which they're drinking. Now, there are blackouts that are full blackouts and episodic blackouts, which I do write about in my book. Episodic blackouts are moments that you don't remember when you're drinking or drugging or whatever. And then full blackouts are like big chunks of time that you don't actually remember. High-functioning alcoholics tend to have episodic blackouts where there might be a chunk of 15 minutes to an hour where they don't really remember the conversation because you might have had a full-on conversation with them and they completely forget what you talked about, or they forget like an event you told them about. And it happens often enough that you're understanding that these are regular occurrences, and those are called episodic blackouts, which tend to get worse over time. They do. They get worse over time, and especially since the drinking does increase over time. They hide their alcohol. Oh my gosh, for my alcoholic, this was a huge one. He was so good at hiding the alcohol, like so good at hiding the alcohol. It was insanity. Oh my God, he would find the craziest places to hide his alcohol. And I had no clue. I absolutely had no clue. And it was like, I would see that there was no alcohol in the house and then I would find him completely drunk and he didn't go anywhere. I was like, what? And at first he would make excuses like, oh, I took an antihistamine, or like, yeah, I just took some NyQuil because I wasn't feeling good. Like all these excuses, but then it just like, it didn't calculate. It did not make sense. But yeah, they hide it because when they need their fix of alcohol, again, they don't want to do it in front of you, but they're going to like go ahead into a closet, into a bathroom and just hide it. Prefer drinking over eating. And I'm going to extend that to say that they don't let alcohol go to waste. So if they're in a social setting, they might order food, but you will see them eating very little, but they will continue to drink. And if there are family members around them who are not drinking or who have a glass of wine or an open bottle of beer or a mixed drink, notice, watch what they do. Sometimes they'll like ask the neighbor who's like the sister or the brother or whatever and be like, hey, are you gonna finish that wine? No, you can go ahead and have it. And you will see them, they're like little scavengers. They like go around and they're collecting everybody's alcohol that's around them because they cannot let alcohol go to waste. Now, one of the alcoholics that I interviewed for my book said, do you know what we alcoholics call that when you don't finish your alcohol? We call that alcohol abuse. So I thought that was really cute. But yeah, so like watch them. They're like little scavengers. They will figure out like who's not drinking all of their alcohol and they're going to finish everybody's alcohol at the table. It's really strange. But they're going to do it it's going to be sneaky. Like you're not going to notice it so much. Or if free drinks come with your meal, let's say you're at a brunch and there's free mimosas and you don't drink mimosas, for example, they will tell the waiter, go ahead and bring a mimosa for them and for me. And you're like, no. They're like, no, I've got this. Don't worry about it. And what they're doing is they're ordering that extra drink for themselves. So just watch for that behavior. They have failed attempts at quitting. They've tried many times to quit. And like I said, think of those milestones that they've set for themselves. Like, I'm getting older. My next birthday, I'm going to quit. Or after Christmas, super duper, that's my New Year's resolution. Or, all right, after the Super Bowl, you can't quit drinking before the Super Bowl, but after the Super Bowl, they've tried so many times, like, I'm going to get on a fitness program. And nothing works. Nada. Zilch. Zero. Nothing works. Every time you bring up the word alcohol in a sentence with them, they will divert the conversation to another subject. So just watch out for this, that if you bring up the drinking at a social situation, or you bring up alcohol, or you bring up the budget, for example, that you see that they're burning through money because they're buying so much alcohol or buying so many drinks at the bars or restaurants, then watch for their conversations. Watch their conversations. Their conversations will always switch to another subject. They will never, ever address what you're trying to address when it comes to alcohol. So I hope this helped you to gain greater clarity about the high-functioning alcoholic. Now remember, again, I will say it one more time, alcoholism is a progressive chronic illness that always gets worse unless if it's arrested, okay? You can't turn alcoholics into moderate drinkers. It just doesn't work. They need to arrest the disease by total abstinence. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for subscribing to my channel below. Hit the bell for notifications. Thank you for sharing this video with other people that could benefit from the signs of a high-functioning alcoholic. Thank you for pledging your support on this YouTube channel by buying a book or two, or buy some books for family members. You can pledge your support on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Michelle S. Fondin, and I will see you in the next video.